What kinds of things did you learn about money growing up?
Oh, there's never enough of it. So I was born in Taiwan. We immigrated here. My parents are, sort of like the small business owner, that whole story. And so growing up, most of the narrative around money is literally, we don't have it. And that's why you can't have things that you want, right? And so I think growing up, that was quite hard. I have a pretty big extended family, and I think most of my family actually grew up with that mindset. I wouldn't say that my parents were particularly great about like savvy, like how do they teach their kid about like budgeting and what are investments, right? And so growing up, really, it was that mindset of, okay, well, how do I save, right, for this potential rainy day? You have like the squirrel mentality, right? Yeah, I would say that would be, and I had to sort of like piece by piece pick it up, right?
Yeah.
Pull up a Google spreadsheet and like track all of my daily expenses, and really that's still a scarcity mentality, right? You still hoard money essentially. And the funniest story here is the day it clicked. I remember my coworker, I was telling him how much money I spent like that month for food. And I was so excited and I was very proud of myself. And he heard me and he starts laughing and he's like, man, he's Australian. So he's like, mate, it's that's less than I spend on cocktails before dinner. And I was like, hey, you're a jerk. But B, I really need to, he's like, are you gonna save your way to like wealth? Like, where are you even putting this money? I'm like, it's my checking account. It's like, it's not even there's no interest, right? I was very young at the time. And so, that to me was like, oh, maybe I need to go back and like actually think about systematically, how am I managing my money versus just like, how do I just save as much as I can and just like leave it there, right?
How might they start thinking about talking about finance or educating their children around the topic of finance? What are your suggestions? What are your thoughts, tips, tricks, anything?
Oh, so many, so many. The most basic, fundamental level, it really comes down to get them involved, right? Like kids are surprisingly more cognizant, right? But just the act of exposure, the act of like they'll see you as a parent doing things and sort of explaining to them like, this is what and you can always, try to figure out how to make it sort of more palatable, but this is why I do that, right? And this is why I don't do this, right? And this is how I think about it. And the more you just sort of expose them to it, the more they'll sort of pick up on it. I think that's the sort of like the most, we'll call it like the most frictionless or osmosis based, version of teaching. Um, and then we have sort of like, more in depth. So there's a ton of books out there, right? Let me see. You can't see my desk is actually covered in finance, like personal finance books now. And more, people are making like these resources because it's becoming a bigger, part of the public mind share, right? So one of the really good ones that I've come across was, here it is, Make Your Kid a Money Genius, right? Even if you're not. This is a fun one. It's a little sort of like it feels a little haphazard, but it really is pretty helpful, just like a basic foundation. It's broken down by their age and sort of like what you should be talking about, what you should not talk about, just tips and tricks. Guy Kawasaki also, and Annie, I think we talked about this last time, also has a book specifically for teens, right? I think it comes down to practice, right? Like I think where financial literacy tends to fail is that if you just teach someone like the concepts and knowledge, it's really hard. Like talking to a kid about taxes or income is not like going to stick really, right? Or how do you budget? Like I think they actually need to go through that process of, okay, well, like, hey, I have this like $5. I've been taught about needs and wants. There's this thing here. Should I spend it? Should I not? Right. And now really is the time to do that, right? You spend like $5, you blow it on a candy bar or like a cheap comic that like, melts, right? Like in the rain. And you'll be like, oh, I learned better next time. Versus like you get a credit card and now you spend $20 or $20,000 on like a jalopy. I don't know what like a hoopty car is now, but like and it breaks down and you're like, oh, I that was a bad idea, right? I should have like actually done some due diligence, right? And so getting those reps in early, I think is so important. And ultimately is probably what's going to get left out of the curriculum, right? It's kind of the wave of curriculum adoption.
Yeah.
And then the sort of most, I would say like the most intensive, slight plug, but online courses, right? Getting them to someone who can sort of help them and help walk them through it, because sometimes it is hard for them to relate to like directly their parents, right? And just hearing it from a knowledgeable other tends to help sort of cement it. More important probably is being able to work with like peers or talk, converse with peers. At Stanford, we have this like big belief in like social cultural aspects of learning, right? And so being able to sort of be in a community of practice and talk to other kids who are learning the same things and sort of like co-developing their sort of understanding is from my perspective probably one of the best ways to really cement long-term understanding of these core concepts.